For two American men, a trip to Paris quickly went from enchanté to merde. We'll tell you why. They were visiting the Eiffel Tower. You know, this tower, it draws about 7 million visitors each year. And why wouldn't it? It's one of the most recognizable symbols of France. And two men visited it recently after what seems like an exciting night out. They got drunk and did what all drunk people love doing after a heavy dose of partying. They passed out. They fell asleep inside the tower, that too in a no-access area of the monument. The next morning, they were found by security guards. The two men were questioned, and it was concluded that they didn't pose any threat. But an official complaint was filed. After all, this unexpected discovery delayed the opening of the Eiffel Tower by an hour. And this has become one of the latest incidents of tourist misbehavior at monuments. Trust us, there are quite a few. This year, the Roman Colosseum was defaced by a Swiss girl. She carved her initials into it. The police launched an investigation against her. Less than a month before that, the monument saw another similar incident, where a tourist cemented his love by writing his and his partner's names on the ancient landmark. What was his excuse? He said he didn't know how old the Colosseum was. A pathetic excuse, right? Not sure if we buy it. Because for as long as there have been monuments, there have been people to deface them. This is a worldwide phenomenon. It comes in all forms, big and small, and it applies to all sorts of landmarks, ancient and modern. And by no means is it limited to Europe. Just this year, a Canadian teenager carved letters on a Japanese temple. An 8th century temple, mind you, a historic temple, defaced with a teenager's fingernail. But as we said, misbehavior is not limited to just historic monuments. Look at this case from 2017, where the victim was a modern landmark, and it was creatively vandalized. The famous Hollywood sign in LA turned into Hollyweed. It was a New Year's Day prank. Not sure how funny it was for the people of LA though. Because landmarks are often defaced out of sheer human stupidity, it's supposed to be a joke, after one drinks up a heady cocktail of daftness, courage and fascination. Other times it's for art, like in 2011 when street artists vandalized Bulgaria's Soviet army statue. They turned it into a colourful tableau of comic book characters. Or like this year in England when blue crayon was scribbled all over an 18th century nude statue. Different levels of artistic competence, surely, but neither were warmly welcomed. Monuments are sometimes defaced as an act of protest as well, to draw attention to a cause. We saw this last year. This is the Washington Monument. It was covered in red paint with vulgar anti-government slurs. An even bigger example of protest vandalism was seen in 2020 when protesters came for statues. These statues had stood in one place for over a century. But during the anti-racism and police violence protests, these statues were pushed down, burned, and colored all over. And here's the contradiction. In both cases, the reason is the same: protests. But while defacing the Washington Monument was unwelcome, the world was happy to challenge these statues. Why? Because they stood for legacies of injustice. So misbehavior with monuments, statues, and iconic art may be subjective, but one thing is clear. When it's in the name of pure selfishness, it's never okay. The hunt for Nessie is back. You know, the Loch Ness Monster, Scotland's mysterious and probably mythical creature. Wait, the latter may ruffle some feathers. Because try telling Nessie enthusiasts that the creature is mythical. This coming weekend on August 26th and 27th, hundreds of them will take part in a hunt for the monster. Monster hunters will come from far and wide, from the likes of Japan and New Zealand. This will be the largest hunt for the creature in half a century. Volunteers with a taste for the supernatural will participate in a surface watch. Many will be involved in person, while others will be glued to their screens catching the live stream. The methods may be different, but all participants will look for breaks in the water. They'll try to catch even the slightest of movements. And this time, they have advanced tech on their side, the kind that's never been used before, like drones for thermal images, infrared cameras, and a hydrophone to detect acoustic signals. Basically, people will go to some serious lengths to settle the debate. They hope to decide, if not prove, whether the famed monster even exists. question is, how did this come about in the first place? What's the origin of this story? It all started 90 years ago when a hotel manager named Aldie Mackay in Scotland's Loch Ness came running into the bar. She told her audience that she'd witnessed a water beast. This grabbed everyone's attention like anything. The sighting made headlines everywhere and birthed the modern-day myth of the Loch Ness Monster. Many say the creature is as real as Bigfoot. Others believe the opposite. They say the myth is rooted in truth. Then there are others who are completely invested in the matter. And this has spurred a host of investigations. Look at this one from 1973. Scotland. Search for Loch Ness Monster by Japanese team begins. 1973. The Japanese team is seen on the hunt, with divers jumping into the loch, all to track down Nessie. But they couldn't. The reason? Not that the creature doesn't exist, but because they couldn't stay too long. The water was freezing. Then there are others who are unraveling the mystery by making most of the myth. Some say a real-world dinosaur may have inspired the loch legend. This is a plesiosaur. It was found in 1990 in England, and because of its deemed connection to Nessie, it's worth about $800,000.
We've nicknamed it Nessie because of the shape, as many people believe that the silhouette of the Loch Ness Monster, so-called Loch Ness Monster, was inspired by this creature. And they do come from the same region, of course, though the lake bed of the Loch Ness, of course, was formed far, 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 far later than this creature died. So the likelihood of plesiosaurs having lived in the Loch Ness are pretty much zero. But it's interesting to note that creatures of this shape and size did live in that region. So perhaps there is some other kind of tale that has been passed down to inspire the Loch Ness story.
Perhaps, but it's all conjecture. No one has ever seen the Loch Ness Monster after that one claim 90 years ago. Yet it continues to inspire investigations. Also memes, cartoons, and movies. But before we end this story, here's a question for you. What do you call 10 Loch Ness Monsters in the USA? Tennessee. Question is, how did this come about in the first place? What is the origin of this story?
It's that time of the year again, when you say on your marks, get set, roar. And what's the result? Bobbing, toothy heads, flapping tails on flailing inflatable T-Rexes. 200 of them. Just look at these dinos. They seem so outraged, almost as if you asked them to eat a broccoli. They are running, as if scampering away from the asteroid that killed their make-believe ancestors, the real dinosaurs. Now, if only they would have run like that. But speaking of running, we are talking about this Dino Dash. It is called the 2023 T-Rex World Championship. It is held annually and started back in 2017 as a team-building activity for a pest control company. This year, it was held in America's Seattle. More than 200 people ran down the track and turned it prehistoric, thanks to their inflatable T-Rex dinosaur costumes. Not to exude Major Ross Geller energy, but T-Rex means Tyrannosaurus rex. These dinosaurs roamed the planet about 65 to 67 million years ago. A study was published 2 years ago. It says that there were about 2.5 billion of them.
It was the largest apex predator in Western North America at the time, and interestingly had no competitors.
No competitors indeed. And apparently, not just in their real life, but also in pop culture, T-Rexes have emerged as one of the most widely known dinosaurs. Hollywood movies like Jurassic Park have added to the fascination.
Here we have a Tyrannosaurus rex, and what's different, it's not a cast or a copy, it's the original. And there are very few. In fact, until about 1970 or 80, there used to be less than a dozen Tyrannosaurus. Most of them already in United States museums. But when Jurassic Park started and spread, the interest in dinosaurs grew enormously, and mostly amateurs started to looking for dinosaurs, for Tyrannosaurus and other dinosaurs in the western United States.
Actually, when I was young, I was actually pretty scared of the T-Rex skeleton. I didn't dare to go in the exhibit. So finally now a real skeleton's here back again. I finally get to see it again as an adult. So sort of like reliving my childhood. Yeah, and personally, I collect a lot of like Jurassic Park T-Rex figurines. So it's also really cool to see an actual one live right here today.
Books, memes, and cartoons also help the case. Remember Barney? This purple guy? He walked around being huggable and adorable, serving his little song dance routines with educational messages. Super cute. Thanks to Barney and other pop icons like him, T-Rexes have been one of the most widely celebrated dinosaur species.
So we knew the grandchildren are so into dinosaurs. They're always like dinosaur this, dinosaur that. So we thought, wow, it's such a good experience to bring them to have a look at this real thing.
T-Rex is the iconic dinosaur. It is huge. It's got a huge head and huge teeth. It's really scary. I think we like feeling small, and boy, do you feel small when you're standing underneath a skeleton, as I have outside the museum where I work.
Maybe it feels this iconic because no one has ever seen a T-Rex in real life. After all, being gobbled up in record time isn't a favored pastime. But then again, dressing up as one, tumbling, scrambling, and winning as one, well, that definitely looks like fun.